me. So did not expect to get it in the first round. And it was a curveball, but it was nothing that we weren't prepared for. It was nothing that we weren't ready for. We knew it was going to be a really difficult match, but we'd done the work at that point. But that was definitely a bump in the road.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea podcast. For today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Adele Fornarino. For those of you that want to support the show, please take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. It's so easy to do. You just click the little hamburger menu, rate the show 5 stars, and hit submit. It helps tremendously with show placement and getting this in front of other people that value human performance, strength and conditioning, and of course, jiu-jitsu. Adele Fornarino is a 2-time ADCC champion who trains out of Atos HQ in San Diego and Absolute MMA in Melbourne, Australia. She recently just dominated the 55 kilo division at ADCC 2024, and she is a phenomenal athlete. To support the show, please check out the show notes. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Adele Fornarino. Well, Adele, the 55 kilo 2-time ADCC champion, finally on the show. And honestly, I am stoked to have some female power on this show. It has been a long stretch of just tons of dudes. So I'm so excited to have you on the show, hear all about ADCC. I'm really stoked that Jake connected us. So thank you for being here.
It's such a privilege to be here. I'm definitely excited to bring some of that female energy, that female power. It's Jiu-jitsu is one of those spaces where it is male dominated. So I'll sneak my way in wherever I can.
It's male dominated, but it's females are sneaky, man. Your ability to this is actually something I wanted to talk to you specifically about because Jake brought this up the other day. He said that you have the power to break things, and he meant truly, like in the real sense of the word, that you just have this ability to literally break people's limbs. And I'm curious, like, where does that strength come from? Obviously, deciding to lean into the athlete side of jiu-jitsu and really accept this as a career and like go for it takes extreme dedication to your mind and your body. But that's also a specific skill. Even strong people don't have that black or white ability to put that kind of pressure on people. So what is it about your game, your style, your training, your upbringing that makes you such a freak when it comes to that kind of break power?
I think it's two parts. Like some of it is strength, but I don't think it's majority strength because I am a smaller person, compared to the bodies that I have on the mats and some of the bigger guys that I have on the mat. I think most of it comes from an understanding of what the objective is from the submission position. So, when you have an arm bar, there's, creating discomfort by bridging into the back of the elbow, and then there's, pulling that arm out as far as you can to really stretch out all the joints, and then putting like braking force through the back of the elbow. Like actually being able to break the thing that you're trying to break, I think is a really important skill. It's not something that you need to like always be practicing day to day. It's just something that you have to have an understanding about. I think it's even more relevant when we're talking about things like leg entanglements. There's a difference between a mat tap with a heel hook, where you catch a heel, you kind of can put some rotational pressure on it, and generally on the mats you get people tapping pretty early because everybody wants to go to their job the next day. Nobody wants to walk around with torn ACLs. They got more important things in their life. But then you get to a competition and you start applying the same kind of rotational force, and the black belt that's a multiple time world champion is looking at you like like what you're doing is nothing, and they're not in any pain, and they're kind of deadpan looking at you. And that's when it's really important to have braking mechanics. So applying some of that lateral pressure through the knee to actually be able to break the ACL rather than just cause discomfort. There's a bit of a difference.
Let's just dive on this difference. I love it. This is like exactly what I came for. You bring up some interesting points about like training on the mats. I can put myself in this basket that you just mentioned, right? Like I was training with one of my partners the other day, and she got me in this heel hook. And to be fair, I'm just not very great at defending heel hooks, but my original academies just weren't big on instructing them in the first place. And then by the time I introduced them into my game, it was, I train people for a living. So I don't want to show up tomorrow hobbling into the training session on crutches, and they go, "What happened?" I go, "Oh, didn't tap my opponent, blew my ACL out of my knee." But it creates a challenge in the training environment because in
Mhm.
most sports, you have the opportunity to ramp up to near 100%. So
Mhm.
if you're a footballer, American or international, or you're a weightlifter, you can always ramp that intensity close and really push the limit. Whether you have pads on, and so the tackle intensity is allowing you to shift things around.
Mm.
But with something like a straight ankle lock, a heel hook, um, an arm lock, the difference between stopping short and going over the line is the potential for that person to not be able to train at all. And that
Yeah,
creates this really interesting buffer around it where for you to get good looks as a top competitor, you have to be able to train near that line. But how do you actually replicate that type of intensity in training without hurting your partner, or worse, or equally bad, getting hurt yourself and then being out of your livelihood, out of competition?
it is a hard balance to find, and a lot of it comes from the trust that you have with your partners on the mat. It generally is we're gonna play closer to that line with the higher ranked guys on the mat and the more professional guys on the mat than we are with the blue belts that are coming in their lunch break from work. It's about like picking the partner. It's also about mutual understanding. It's important that the partner that is in these submissions understands what's going on, understands where their tipping point is, and is the more comfortable you get with that, the more you understand that braking mechanic, the closer you can kind of ride that line of injury versus just discomfort. But it is a practice thing. It is something that takes a lot of trust between your competitors. But even things like specific sparring and, you know, going through the motion of finishing the submission slow so you can really get good hip positioning and get good control on the heel or get good control on the arm and, really feel out where you get to that, at the brink of, okay, if I put any more pressure into it, I know I can break it and I know I have enough strength to break it and I know I can put enough force into it because anatomically it's fully extended, it's out of the socket, I'm putting the pressure in and I still have another 50% of bridging mechanics through my hips kind of in the back pocket.
So hearing you talk about this is very cool because I have done, this will be the 150th episode, mostly world class people. No one's
Awesome.
ever put braking and mechanics into the same sentence and then mentioned anatomy immediately afterwards. So obviously, this is something that you guys talk about. This is something you're
Yeah.
thinking of in your training camps and at your academy. Where did that start to show up? Because that is a different intention. You're learning how to do a heel hook positionally is probably taught across hundreds of thousands of academies, but thinking about learning that with the intention of being able to completely end the interaction is entirely different. And mentioning things like anatomy and fulcrums and tension points and all this is like, now you're starting to put it up on the whiteboard and you're actually like game planning. How has that worked itself into the way that you guys prepare? Why talk about it like that?
I think that it's especially relevant for, in the female divisions where they are quite bendy and they have more range of motion through their ligaments. So I experienced it pretty early on, specifically with arm bars, like getting to arm bar positions and cracking it on. But it's just not applying the braking force that I wanted to, so they're sneaking out of it. So kind of going back to the drawing board after some of those encounters and making adjustments and really strengthening the position, like the maintenance of the position of the armbar itself, so that you can buy yourself more time to make those actual braking mechanic adjustments to put the damage. It sounds horrific. It sounds
No, no,
almost
I'm like,
violent.
yes, like more. I want to hear, this is what I want.
It makes it sound
More,
super
please.
violent, but it's one of those things of like if I'm putting you in an armbar, I'm not putting you in an armbar to hold you there and cause this. I'm putting you in an armbar to try and break your arm. And if I'm
Yes.
putting you there and I don't have the capacity to actually break your arm, well, it's not as dangerous as a position, and it's just a matter of sheer will of mind. Can that person in that position kind of tough out the pain that they're experiencing and then get to the other side of that and then continue that round. And you see it in these black belt matches where girls are sitting in straight ankle locks and they're not even flinching because yeah, it probably hurts. It's probably causing them discomfort, but their foot is still actually attached to their body, so they can continue on that round. It's important that if I get a hold of your foot, if I get a hold of your heel, if I get a hold of your arm, if I break it, you shouldn't be able to continue through. And
Totally.
there's some, epic matches where, I think I'm trying to think of a good example. There was one with Bia Mosquito who had her arm completely broken and was unable to continue on in that round. And she wanted to, she could go through the physical pain of it,
Hmm.
but now it became the battle of her arm is broken. She can't move it, she
Yeah.
can't use it, and it's just she can't actually continue on that round, even though as much as she wants to, as much as she can push through that physical pain, she can't push through the fact that her arm is pointing in the wrong direction and she can't use it anymore.
I mean, horrific, gruesome, violent, whatever. I think it is, maybe aside from just defending yourself and running, which is like a, if you go back to like early uh, Gracie and action days, like being able to
Yeah,
control the clench and then distance yourself from your opponent and leave if you want to leave, ultimately in a self-defense situation. The second best use case is to be able to stop what's going on in the
yeah,
moment and then decide what you want to do. And if someone were to accost you or whatever and you snap their arm off, yeah, they might want to still attack you, but like, good luck, dude. And now you can decide how you want to go about the situation. So it is the submission element, which is what makes jujitsu so special,
mm,
to the nth degree. It's, you're truly mastering the ability to create pressure, and that transcends weight class, strength levels, all that kind of stuff. Because
yeah,
especially as a, as you said, a smaller person, what better showcase of jujitsu than the fact that, and I know that you don't do this anymore. I've listened to you say that, maybe in my older days I would do this, but I don't feel a need to anymore. But when a 120 kilo guy walks on the mat and you get him in a tap and you're 55 kilos, that is a fantastic representation of everything that you're learning and practicing.
yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I was coaching last night. I had somebody come in, and he was from Adelaide, and he kind of walked up to me. And he's a bigger guy. I'd say like plus 90 kilos, edging on 100 kilos, and he just kind of goes, "Do you remember me?" I go, "No, no, no." Like, well, 10 years ago, I came into this gym and you were there and you were, orange belt. And
Yeah.
he's like, I was a white belt at the time and I was thinking about quitting jujitsu and I had just done a competition and lost horrifically in this competition. But I came in and I rolled with you and you beat the shit out of me. And then I decided that jujitsu actually works and I'm going to continue training. So I was
Yeah.
like, I had that moment of, I had like, jujitsu works. Like if you're smaller
Yeah.
but you're more technical, you can roll with the bigger guys and prove that jujitsu is kind of what it was when it was created, which is the martial art for the smaller person, where
Mm-hmm.
you can use your attributes to benefit you. That you don't just need to be the bigger, stronger guy. You can be faster, more technical, smarter, all that kind of thing.
When you take your skill set and you go into the absolute division, what's one of the biggest challenges that you notice facing opponents that are in your, in your division, but bigger and inherently probably stronger
Yeah.
just by a size and bone density and stuff situation? Like what presents itself as the biggest hurdle there?
Apart from the fact of they're just physically stronger and physically bigger, so they're harder to move around.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a battle of if somebody's bigger and stronger, if you make a mistake and they capitalize on that mistake, they get inside space or they start to shut down your guard or they get grips that you don't like, it is significantly harder to undo that mistake. It's
Right.
with a smaller person, you can kind of fight it out and cause scrambles. And yeah, sometimes you win the scrambles and sometimes you lose them. But with a bigger person, it's like it's physically harder. It's when they
Yeah.
grab you and you're trying to undo that, it's really difficult. But I think something that popped into my head when I was backstage ready to go out to the open weight division is the a little bit of fear creeps in about the fact of they can actually they can injure me, they can hurt me. They're bigger
Even
than
by
me.
accident.
Even
Yeah.
my accident, it's most of the time people are getting injured by people that are a little bit bigger than them. That's where most injuries come from,
Yeah.
let alone an important competition where they're very much willing to snap something on my body. That fear starts to creep in. So it is important to kind of shove that fear down because you've committed to it, you're doing it. Like
Totally.
there's no point being scared when you're out there. Um, but yeah, there is that little battle that creeps in.
Absolute division's wild when you think about it. When you actually think about like what's going on, I think we often applaud, as we should, people that dominate in the absolute because it's so cool. But imagine if Imagine if MMA had an absolute division. So you get like a flyweight contender be like, okay, cool. And for your next round, you're going to go and fight John Jones for the absolute. It's
See,
like,
that's $1 million
that would,
idea right there, because people would pay to watch it. People would love
I'll
that.
call, I'll call Craig or put me in contact with Craig.
Yeah,
That'll be next
done.
year. Right. Uh, but it's wild. But jujitsu is this space, I think, because of the dynamics of the art form and the fact that you're not getting hit, of course, on purpose, like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
lack of head trauma, it allows for it. And so you don't get many combat sports or interactions where you get to see a David and Goliath happening all the time. Like
yeah,
every tournament's going to have that match where it's the best person from lower weight class and usually like a heavyweight in the final, and they put on just tremendous matches because each present a unique skill set and variation to the other. The bigger person, it's much harder to control the little person. It's moving quickly and getting underneath you and getting to your back all of a sudden. But yeah, you make a mistake, and good luck getting someone who's 100 kilos off of you
yeah,
in side
100%.
control. So it's it's pretty cool. This past ADCC was obviously for you life changing. You had lead up to it talking about what you were going to go do. You had a completely new mindset going into this. You said that 2022 was happy to be there. It was fun to show up and be part of this big event. But this one, you not only did you go into it with the mindset that you thought you could be a champion, but then you made it happen. I mean, a stacked field, right? Totally stacked. And jiu-jitsu only gets better every year. I think people are getting more athletic. They're taking care of their body outside of the mats. Their strength and conditioning. They're hiring coaches, mindset coaches.
Yeah.
This isn't 15 years ago. So you're also winning at a time when the field is the most stacked and most prepared. What did that mean for you?
Um, for me, it was all the time and energy we put into it. Kind of, we were just ticking boxes. We were making sure that by the time we got there, and I always say we because I had a massive team behind me of people that were supporting me and planning these training sessions or my diet or my recovery or my strength, whatever it's going to be, and a team of people around me making sure that I was doing all the right things. And obviously you had a conversation with Jake, and he would have taken you through some of those things. But it we were trying to just be as professional as possible, and then we were just trying to make sure that we were kind of doing more than what we saw other people doing. We were making sure we're being more specific with the lifting, and talking to the right people to make sure that that was where it needed to be. We're making sure we were talking to the best people for nutrition to make sure that where the nutrition is where it needed to be. We were making sure that we were doing our research on the other competitors so that we weren't leaving anything to chance. So for me, it was very exciting, but I went into that competition with the belief that I could achieve that. So I can't tell if this sounds super arrogant, but for me it was like yeah, we put the time and the energy in, and that was the result of it, and that was why we did what we did, and it was kind of destiny at that point. It was always going to happen that way because we left absolutely nothing to chance.
Yeah. When you look at that experience, was there anything that surprised you? I mean, I feel like preparing for a big moment in sports is kind of like planning a really long road trip. Like you get everything lined up, you think you're going to stay at this hotel and you're going to go this far on this day, and you map it all out, and then you blow a tire halfway through, or the hotel is booked and they double booked you, and now you can't see, you got to camp on the side of the road or whatever. And so your ability to get from A to B ends up being a lot more about how you can roll with the punches than the plan. Obviously, you prepare, you get all the supplies, you fill up the tank, you do all the stuff, but you as the athlete have to be able to mentally break through those random things that happen. So is there anything
Yeah.
leading up to this, or even, once you guys are in Vegas and you're at the event, that was like, oh shit, all right, let's get back on task here. We got to get through this.
Yeah, there was some little kind of bumps in the road. There was some like niggly injuries and things like that that we had to monitor and we had to stay ahead of. I think the major curveball was the bracket that got released. We, you know, as soon as people were getting announced for the 55, we were trying to seed them. We were trying to, get ahead of it, and have some kind of guess about how the bracket was going to work out. It worked out nowhere close to however any of us tried to work out the bracket. I wanted a
Yeah.
match with my I did not expect to get it in the first round, and it was a curveball, but it was nothing that we weren't prepared for. It was nothing that we weren't ready for. We knew it was going to be a really difficult match, but we'd done the work at that point. But that was definitely like that was definitely a bump in the road, or I wouldn't be as severe as calling it a flat tire, but it was an unprepared thing. It was an unforeseen thing.
In the moment that you knew you won, what was it like taking that all in the arena? It's a T-Mobile arena. Did you ever think that grappling would be in the T-Mobile arena?
No.
Like, that's pretty wild.
It was two
Obviously, the
ADCCs ago. It was on a basketball court
right.
with just some mats on the ground and a basketball court and people with like camcorders, and
Yeah.
it's not with like there weren't any fireworks or anything back then, so it's definitely come a long way.
Yeah, how do you savor a moment like that as an athlete? I think with the Olympics having just gone by too, you watch these athletes who've prepared. The Olympics is really sad because these people, they prepare for 4 years. In most of them in sports that are completely underviewed, that no one knows about, right? And so
Yeah.
they go through all the trials and tribulations of an NFL player, of a footballer, of a grappler, and no one watches, no one cares. And then there's this one moment, and you know, everyone except one person in the field falls short. And so all the efforts, all the sacrifices of family, of work, foregoing opportunities, it just doesn't matter. And no one cares about you. So, how do you, in a moment where it actually does go your way, cherish it, savor it, and be like, all of a sudden you're not just flashback and you're in the hotel and you're like, no, what just happened?
Well, to be honest, like it is a little bit like that where it still to this day feels quite surreal. It's hard to properly put that memory in and it be a realistic thing that happened, because it was such a distant thing. It was such a goal, a dream. For it to have actually happened, it is this weird sensation. I did get a lot of advice from people afterwards that have accomplished amazing things, telling me, take the time to celebrate, take the time to go back home, have some time with your friends, have, drinks and dinner, and actually celebrate it and be proud of it, instead of moving on to the next thing, or instead of pretending like it didn't happen, or downplaying the accomplishment. It was really important to be proud of it and be loud about it, and be, vocal with everybody that it was a really cool thing and it was an amazing achievement. And I to be honest, struggled with that a little bit. I all the A lot of the other belts that I've won from other events live in drawers or under my bed, or like I don't put them around the house, um, because I just kind of win it and move on to the next thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
win an event, move on to the next one, win an event, move on to the next one. Um, but it did feel nice to stop for a second and celebrate it, and also celebrate it with my teammates, because they were very excited for me. So it gave them a time to be able to celebrate this as well. With the stuff for the Olympics, it is quite sad that they only get a time every 4 years to celebrate and to
Yeah.
showcase their skills. But that's why I think it's so important to love what you do. Like I do jujitsu because I love jujitsu, and I have been incredibly lucky with the success that I've had, and with the success that I've had as well at the time that I've had that success, because jiu-jitsu is
Yeah.
quite big right now. There's, the Instagram is a massive thing, so you get a big following from it. There's a lot of eyes on these events because we can stream it online now, because there are these platforms that showcase it around the world. So
Right.
I'm being able to succeed in the sport that I love at a time where it gets attention.
Yeah.
But I want to think that even if it wasn't the case, even if wasn't getting eyes on it, or this attention, that I would still be loving what I'm doing, because I just genuinely love the sport. I love training. I love the experience that I get from jujitsu. So I do it regardless of the external validation from random people in the Instagram comment section.
Or not positive comments
Or
in the
not
comments,
positive
right?
comment. I've been getting a little bit of that recently. Yeah, I've been getting a little
That's a
bit of
good thing.
like,
That's a good sign. That means
I,
you're doing the right thing.
people keep telling me that all publicity is good publicity, but I still find myself reading through that comment section, wanting to comment back to some of these people and be like, nah, I shouldn't do that.
They're dorks sitting in their parents' basements. That's honestly, it's probably true. Like 90% of the time, it's some. It. I was listening to actually. I don't know. Do you follow MMA much?
A little bit, a little bit. I wouldn't be
So,
able to tell you all the names, but
do you know Sean Brady?
yeah, it rings a
He's
bell.
like he's like tattooed from the neck down, but he just had this rant yesterday about Twitter. He was like, they were giving him shade. He's like, these people would never say, no people on Twitter would ever say the things that they say on Twitter to your face, to
Yeah.
anyone's face. So it's
Yeah.
this weird ecosystem that exists where people feel super protected by anonymity, and whatever their, you know, Summer John 6639, whatever handle that's like completely anonymous.
You had
But
that pretty fast. I feel like that's your underground handle
so
that you're going
Summer
through and
John
like trolling every
6669.
anybody sees Summer John 666 come up on their Instagram. I know
That's me.
exactly who it
Just
is.
throwing shade, throwing shade. Wow. Maybe all right. Maybe that could be a side. That could be a side gig from the podcast. Uh, but yeah, they mean nothing. It's whatever. So you take the positive and then you laugh at the negative. But
Yeah.
this does bring up an interesting point. You mentioned being born at the right time. I mean, what a random dice to roll to be like talented at jiu-jitsu and also be alive competing in your prime at a time that it's like growing the fastest it's ever been. It's not 15 years ago where like ADCC existed, but people didn't, no one was following it. It wasn't able to be streamed. You didn't have, social media wasn't prominent. So people aren't sharing clips and highlights. So it's this weird balancing act of like, to some degree, it makes the sport disingenuous because
Mm.
there's this
Yeah.
grab for notoriety and fame and self-aggrandizement. But at the same time, that's now allowing you guys as professional grapplers to pursue an actual living
Yeah.
doing this, where
100%.
like you can take your passion and take your skill set, and who knows how many like little girls are going to be so inspired by what you're doing and want to grow up and they want to emulate that behavior and they want to dedicate themselves to something. And like, would they have done that if they weren't exposed to you from this kind of stuff? So do you ever think about that? Like there's a responsibility to yourself to be genuine and true and
Yeah.
do what makes you feel like good. But then there's this potential responsibility to like all the up and coming athletes too, that you can now have an impact on. So do you have a hard time with that ever?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's this balancing act. I think anything that I put out, I want it to be authentic. I want it to be genuine to who I am. I don't want to go out there and pretend to be somebody that I'm not. Even, some of the things that we put out about like the daddy persona, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It didn't come because we made it out. We made it up because we thought it would be like a good marketing tool, for instance. We played into it because people enjoy it and people find it funny or people can relate with it. But it came up through a genuine conversation in the gym. It was something that quite naturally came up and naturally kind of took its own life and started now spreading. But I don't have any intention of putting anything out there that's not true, that's not genuine. Um, Social media can be an amazing thing. It can also be a really difficult thing. It just depends on how you kind of look at it and how tough your skin is sometimes. I
Yeah.
do really like the fact that I get to spread my story and try and motivate other people. On the flip side of all those negative comments that we were talking about, I've also gotten some amazing messages, about parents that have told me about their kid that was so excited to see me at ADCC and so motivated and would love to meet me and would love to touch the belt and things like that. I get messages from people that are later on in their career talking about how refreshing it was to see a smaller person winning the absolute division, and we got one for the smaller jiu-jitsu people out there. So I as much as I get some negative comments that are more public, I also get some amazing comments and amazing messages from people that are motivated from some of the things that I've done, and that's why I do it as well. I want to make jujitsu and the kind of outer parts of jujitsu better than when I came into it. I want to make it bigger. I want to make it better. I want to leave the next generation with an even better environment than what I've had.
That's a beautiful and awesome thing. It would be nice if everyone adopted that mindset. It would probably be left with a really cool, high growth sport. So tell me the daddy story. Tell me the story of this, this persona, which is, it's funny because I feel like definitely in sport, but in combat sports too, developing a little bit of a caricature is a super risky thing to do
Yeah.
because it can go great and you can totally embody everything about it if it's genuine, which is what you alluded to. And that's such a key
Mm.
part, because you've seen athletes before lean into something that's working but isn't really who they are, and then they end up in this spot in the future where they're super conflicted about how to go forward.
Yeah.
And nobody likes when they can smell bullshit.
Yeah.
So
100%.
but this seems funny, it seems genuine. There's obviously like some humor and banter behind it that isn't like all on the table all the time. So what
Mm.
was the genesis of leaning into this?
Well, it came from we were at the gym. I was in my training camp, training quite hard, being quite like serious and professional, and just trying to win every exchange and be a bit of a bulldog on the mats when I was training. And one of my training partners, Alanis. Alanis is an incredible black belt. She's originally from America, but she's since moved to Australia at the moment. She's Levi Jones Leary's partner.
Yep.
She's so incredibly talented. But she was making comments and she was like, "Oh, like you're walking around with this daddy energy." And I kind of had a giggle and I was like, oh, that's that's funny you say that. She's like, yeah, you have this like daddy energy about you, this daddy aura where you're walking around like your chest is puffed and
Yeah.
you're owning the room and you're like this alpha bravado energy. And we were kind of giggling about it back and forth, and then it just kind of grew from there. Where anytime I was on the mat, just being a little bit of a brute, or demanding my space on the mat, whatever it would be, was just like that oh, the daddy energy's coming out again. And then like we,
And
we
then you
kept it pretty we kept it pretty like personal, like internal for a bit, and then we were cracking jokes about I had who's number one coming up, and we were like, oh, I got to do something funny, what can we do that, classic Australians, let's try and just do something funny, let's get some
yeah.
attention that way. And she's like, oh, write something on your fingernails. I'm like, oh yeah, why not? I'll do that. She's like, you gotta write daddy. You gotta write daddy on your fingernails. I'm like, you know what? Why not? And then I told my manager about it. My manager brought me a hat that said daddy on it, and we just kind of lent into it a little bit more. So we shared that
Well,
side
and
of
then
things with
you
everybody.
won.
Yeah.
And so you're able to capitalize on it, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Like I won that match, and then straight away as soon as I won, I put the daddy hat on, and then it just took on a life of its own, and now people really love it, and I get asked about it all the time. But even to this day, I still have
Oh,
daddies sitting on my nails.
but that's good. It gives something. It gives people something to grab onto. It's like I'm such a big fan. I just think humor is great. I think it's like the best marketing tool of all time. So
Yeah.
when athletes that are like super serious in their performance are able to chum it up a little bit and like poke fun, it's like refreshing. When people are too serious, it's like, it is at the end of the day, it is like high performance pajamas on the ground,
Yeah.
like we can
Jiu-jitsu
we can
makes
all
no
laugh about
sense.
this.
Jiu-jitsu is the weirdest sport in the world. I say this all the time. Jiu-jitsu's made up. It's the weirdest sport in
uh,
the world. It makes no sense.
how did it feel? I mean, being at ADCC, winning, of course, great. We talked about that, but this was also like the Aussie showcase. I mean, parallel events. You got Craig putting on this wild card event, so rad,
Yeah.
and Levi's performance just, I think it stopped a lot of people in their tracks. Like, what? Open guard works?
Yeah.
Like playing guard works at a high level. This is crazy, and to see both you guys perform so well on the same weekend, it just says a lot for Australian jiu-jitsu. I mean, I've talked to Jake about this, and Australia is just like it hasn't always had jiu-jitsu the way, like, it's been really big in America for a while comparatively.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that Australia doesn't have fantastic people. It does, all of
Mm.
you, but it's still newer. Like, how is this now the front of the wave on just what I'm assuming is about to be an insane amount of progress for you guys in terms of the sport and the eyes on it, because you have such dominant people actually in the events, and Craig's persona of just propagating jiu-jitsu to everyone also.
Yeah. I think jiu-jitsu in Australia is always growing. I think now with the access to so much information, so much instructionals from, other high level competitors, we are growing exponentially. We're catching up to where the level is in America. I think also with more people doing it, we have more training partners, we have more gyms. So that's also helping grow the sport. But also there are some really high level competitors that have been out there on the main stage and brought that understanding and that knowledge and that experience back to Australia so that the rest of the community can grow on that. So, Lockie Giles is an excellent example. Lockie
Of course.
is like, he's a wizard. He's an absolute wizard. Some of the things that comes out of his brain, I just cannot understand. He has just a different mind, a different perspective on jiu-jitsu. But he's based out of Australia, so we get to take advantage of that. We get to learn from him. He had an amazing run through ADCC and experience what high level jiu-jitsu looks like, from the competitive side of things. So he could take that experience, pull it back, and educate everybody on what the other guys are doing and how their training camps look and what techniques are working. So, we just keep growing from those experiences. Um, but I think Australian Jiu Jitsu is definitely on the map. I think we have a lot of talent here. I think that there's another generation after me that's coming that is just as scary, if not more scary. And I think it's only just going to continue growing.
So you train with Lachlan,
Mm-hmm.
Alanis, and Levi, right? All of you at don't say it so that I can. It starts with a P, something MMA. Does it
No,
start
no,
with a P?
it starts with an A. It starts with an A.
Absolute.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Wow, that would have lost all my street cred there. Um, what's it like being on the mats there? I mean, that's an all-star cast, right? You you were talking about how Australia has great people. Well, they're all there, right there with
Yeah.
you on those mats. So, what's a training session like when you guys are in camp? What are the vibes like? I would imagine Australians are keeping it pretty fun, but you
Yeah.
guys are all super dominant, so it has to be a little serious.
Yeah, so I train out of Absolute and I train out of Dominance MMA, so I do a little bit of cross training. But when I'm at Absolute, it is awesome to have so many high level competitors on the mat, so we can all kind of pick each other's brains and ask the questions and learn from each other's experiences, which can be really useful. But we're in Australia, we don't treat everything super seriously, so we get hard work done. Like, we go out there, we do hard rounds, we do hard specific sparring. We spend a lot of time doing specific drilling, things like that. But we're also quite close. We're also very good friends, and we hang out and get coffees and things like that. So it's also just a nice community to be a part of. I think it's easier when you have a lot of like-minded people.
Yeah.
Um, so we can understand what each other's going through. If I'm struggling with something, like, I struggle with sometimes the travel, sometimes I can talk to them about it, and they can resonate with it. They understand the struggles that come with that. If I have a particular injury, they've probably experienced that in the past, or vice versa, so we can all help each other in that way. But it definitely does make a difference to have like-minded people around you.
Who do you and Levi get your nails done at the same person? Because they're talented. I mean,
No,
the
but now I
the
feel like
what
we
you just
should.
showed me was like, I was like, that's skill. That's not, you didn't do that yourself. Someone's
No,
doing
no,
this.
Alanis is actually really good at doing nails, and Levi did my eyebrow slit. I don't know if you can see it; it's kind of faded
Oh,
now.
nice.
But and he did that. Oh, it would have been like 2 days before ADCC. I rolled through his Airbnb, and he gave me an eyebrow slit, and we were just having a laugh about it.
I told Jake, I said if Levi comes on, I'll dye my hair.
Do it!
I
Oh my
usually
god,
I
we have
bleach
to.
it. I bleach it here and there, but I'll 100% I'll go blue or something like that. I think
You
it would be
have to.
hilarious to just
He's always changing it
have
up.
that.
It's always something different. I think it's blue at the moment, but he did pink for a while. He's done like red. They've done some funky colors.
So were you guys kind of all watching each other's match? Like, what was the environment like being T-Mobile Arena for ADCC? All the training back rooms are there, and then the UNLV stadium's pretty close, right? So it's not. So were you guys going back and forth and like cornering each other, or what was that like?
No, so I wasn't able to get to CJI. I
Mm,
Because the ADCC finals were the day after the finals of CJI. I was quite focused on like my own journey, my own competition. Having said that, we did watch the matches. We streamed them live, to support all the guys there, because there's some amazing competitors there. Levi Jones and I obviously train at Atos, so I was keeping an eye on all the Atos crew that was there as well. But I wasn't able to go there. But Levi and Alanis did support me and did come through and watch
that's
the
awesome.
finals as well. They found their way in and was able to be a part of that, which is super exciting to have them there.
So as a fan of the sport, as a spectator, this was a massive win. Two events that were so kick ass on the same weekend. It was incredible spectacle of grappling for 72 hours, right?
Yeah.
As a competitor, as someone who's worked super hard to get there, has made a bunch of sacrifices on the road to get there, and then also became a champion there this year. What were the emotional dynamics with CJI going on, ADCC going on? I think they kind of had to play this advertising card where they were constantly undermining ADCC. Whether or not that was genuine, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it worked to gain viewers. And they were jockeying on the same day to get eyes on one, not the other. So, what did it feel like as someone who had worked so hard to get there, to be there, but also have this like kind of gossipy thing going on at the same time?
When it first got announced, it was a little bit scary, to be honest, because there was just so many unanswered questions. You know, was ADCC going to go ahead? How many competitors were they going to take? You know, how was it going to divide the audience? What was going to happen there? So there was a little bit of like there was a little bit of fear, a little bit of unsureness coming into the event. But the closer it got, the more you could kind of see that there was hype for both events, and that both events could exist without completely killing the other event. Um, I think that the divisions that still reign king are the female divisions, just because there weren't there besides three competitors at CJI, there weren't any other females.
Totally.
So our divisions still hold validity to the wins that came through there, and so do the other divisions. Like it's one of those things where like the divisions were still so difficult, even though it was split between two events. The divisions themselves were still stacked divisions full of multiple time world champions and
Right.
competitors that have been on the scene for such a long time. So I think that they both events could exist um, and still bring an audience and be successful and support the jiu-jitsu community. I think it was just a bit scary at the time.
Just like scary, like unsure about what it would do to the event that you were in, or
Well, yeah,
scary like how's this going to affect me?
a bit of both, especially being
Yeah.
a female competitor. If ADCC completely fell apart, the female competitors had nowhere to go. We couldn't
Right.
we couldn't go to CJI because there was no space for us. There was literally no time on the roster for a female division. Um, and I think that that's no fault from anybody. I think that that's just a learning experience for everybody, for the CJI crew. I think they have every intention of going out of their way to support female competitors. So
Right.
it's no fault of theirs, but it was just it just happened to be that way, and it left the females in a little bit of a tricky spot where if ADCC did fall apart and we'd put all this time and energy and effort into our training camps and into our trials, what was next for us, like what was actually going to happen
Right.
if nobody was watching ADCC.
If they do, if they don't do CJI next year, and this does become a biannual thing, and you had the opportunity to go to one or the other, it's a little bit of a hypothetical here, right? I'm leading the witness, but like, uh, having been to that event and seen the other one, does one speak to you more than the other?
um, so I've worked with Mo and ADCC for a few years now, and they've always looked after me.
Yeah.
They've always, helped me when I needed help and supported me when I needed support and encouraged me when I needed encouragement. So and Mo has also fought for, female equality as well, making sure that the prize money is obviously the same, things like that, and growing the divisions. I think he cops a little bit of smack, because
For sure.
it's not him always making or signing off on all the decisions. He's putting it through to the board that actually runs the event, but he he's the guy that everybody sees. So he's the guy that's going to cop all the smack for everything, whether it goes right or whether it goes wrong. And quite often he cops smack when it goes wrong, just because people like to find somebody to blame.
Right.
Um, so I love ADCC. I love what they've done and how they've grown the sport. On the flip side of that, $1 million is $1 million. That's life changing money.
Well, it's
Especially,
like 1.3 for you, right?
it's
Doesn't it end up
1.6, I
being?
think. I think
Jeez.
it's a decent chunk of change for us.
I
The
mean,
the
I felt
conversion
bad for
makes it even
Levi,
better.
but I feel bad for Levi.
Yeah, well, I
Oh,
I don't think it's the
that's
last you'll see
crazy.
of Levi. I think he'll be back,
No, no, not at
and
all. Not at
he'll be
all.
ready to get back out there with a even more of a vengeance.
I think
But
it's
$1 million is $1 million. It's a tricky one. I can understand why the guys went to CJI for $1 million. It is life changing money.
it is why it's still just kind of nutty to me that Nicky Rod is a a 750,000 air, and so is Cade. Like that's just kind of crazy that
I love how you say
9 months ago.
750 air because taxes.
Yeah, that tax is coming in hot.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but that's wild. That's at the end of the day, it's a net win for jiu-jitsu just in the fact that an event actually happened where that happened. But to your point about Mo, and I think this is it's one of the kind of bummer parts about this whole run up and everything is that everything that Craig can come out and say, it puts the burden of proof on ADCC to show parts of their business that no business would ever show. No
Yeah.
business would ever open the door to let you see parts of their business when they're in a growth stage. So I understand his point about like, okay, you've gone from this stadium to booking a bigger stadium. Bigger stadium costs more money. That could have gone to the athletes. True. But in the absence of CJI, so let's say CJI doesn't exist and he never gets to pull that off with whoever this anonymous donor is that decided to throw $1 million at grappling, which is ludicrous, on basically no guarantee of return.
Yep.
That's a needle in a haystack, 1 in a million shot that just
I
happened to
wish I
happen.
had that kind of money that I could just throw away $3 million and not even think twice about
Right. Like, oh yeah, I don't know. If you make it back, just send it my way. Cool.
it.
Like that doesn't happen. That doesn't actually happen, but it happened. So in the absence of that, ADCC does again the most for grappling of any promotion ever.
Yeah.
Had it not been for CJI, like the bigger stadium, more eyes, bigger streaming rights, bigger roster, more competitive, all that happened. It only got dampened by the fact that this other event happened. And two athletes walked away with a ton of money, and the other athletes walked away with money, but it makes ADCC look like this super greedy organization that's always been taking from athletes. And I just don't get that vibe as a fan because I've also been able to watch all the great ADCC matches because they've been spending money on making them great.
I think that there are some positive things that CJI did. There are some, you know, risky things that CJI did. It's really hard to know. Obviously, the pay increase for the ADCC athletes, the prize money for the males and females got equalized. CJI, even though they did some risky things, I think they still did some positive things for the sport. Off the back end of CJI, the pay for males and females got equalized. The pay in general for the athletes got increased. So there were some things that it's so hard to say whether those things were always going to happen or whether they only happened because CJI was a thing. I think I'd be, a little bit foolish to think that they were always going to happen regardless of CJI. I think CJI definitely gave them a push.
Mm.
So it the athletes did, whether they were doing CJI, whether they were doing ADCC, did benefit from this drama that was caused by two events kind of running at each other head on.
When you look at a sport like jiu-jitsu, it's special, and grappling or combat sports, I mean, in general, are special because it is one of the unique environments in sports where I feel like there's a way more equality between men and women in terms
Mm.
of viewership, opportunity, and excitement, and everything that you come to a sporting event for. And I feel like both, kind of all of the different figureheads in these promotions really go to bat to try to make it that way. And you
Mm.
don't see that in a lot of, you don't see, uh, NBA commissioners and WNBA commissioners trying to equalize the NBA and the WNBA the way that you see in grappling. They put female contenders as headliners on fights. Females have some of the best mixed martial arts fights that you can watch. You
Mm.
can see a high level grappling event and they're showcased side by side, or they're promoted above male competitors. And I think that that's a special environment. What does it mean to be
Mm.
part of that as a top female, as a spokesperson for the sport, who's able to see a little bit of the other side of it from, Mo's perspective and people like that?
It is cool to see that that there is, like, we are chasing that equality. We are getting a platform where the female competitors can be recognised and can be celebrated just as much as the males. It's not perfect. I'd be foolish to say that it's perfect across the board. We still have a very big gap in pay for a lot of events. We still are quite regularly underrepresented in some of the events where we have maybe one female card when it's packed full of other male competitors. So there is still space for growth in that way. There's still space to equalize it even more. I think that females have some of the best jiu-jitsu in the world. I think that we're interesting to watch. So um, I think that we're just going to keep pushing it in that direction to try and equalize it in every way that we can.
What do you think are some of the hurdles?
I think audience. I think it's we're still quite commonly in the mindset that guys don't want to watch female jiu-jitsu, and sometimes that is the case. But I personally don't enjoy watching 120 kilo people push at each other. But they seem to quite frequently headline the events. So it's this balancing act of, like, I think that men in general need to understand that just because it's female jiu-jitsu, there's no need to devalue it, or get in the comment section and be like, yeah, but I could beat those girls, because that's quite regularly what happens. I think that we need to be willing to appreciate female jiu-jitsu and be willing to celebrate it, and that's what's going to help a lot. It's the thing about these events is, for the organizers of these events, it's all about viewership. It's all about putting asses in chairs. It's all about how many streams they can get online. So I think the female community need to continue to support other females. So get your Flow Grappling membership. Don't just use your boyfriend's membership. Get to these events to show that there's a lot of female interest. I know firsthand that there's a lot of female interest in these events. I go into gyms quite regularly and see all the females that are training. I get messages all the time from female competitors and female grapplers saying how excited they are for these events. It's one thing to be excited. It's another thing to show these events that there is a female audience.
With the, not to just beat the dead horse of CJI, but what do you make of, Ffion Davies and Mackenzie Dern super fight is awesome. That's great to have two big names in the sport come together to showcase it as its own event, not in the bracket, right? Which I guess you could argue give us our own bracket, but
Yeah.
to have that kind of big level event, I think was great. The Gabby Garcia event almost undermines everything else, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Like, there's a lot of tongue in cheek there. Obviously they have a good friendship, and I think that they could both laugh at the whole thing, and there was some humor on both sides of it. But when you're looking at like equality in the sport, what do you make of an event like that?
I'm so in two minds about the Craig and Gabby match, because it got eyes. At the end of the day, there was 150,000 people live on that stream watching that match.
Right.
So it did its job. It brought in an audience. It brought viewership, and that was the whole point of CJI. It's the whole point of ADCC. It's bringing in viewership,
Right.
and it did that job. And I think as long as you see it from the lens of the whole point of it's supposed to be a bit funny. It's not a real
Promotion.
showcase
Yeah.
of men, like male versus female jiu-jitsu. That's just not the case. The whole point is just the show of it. Craig is sitting there before he gets out there, and he's ripping off his pants, and he's doing a dance, and he's taking a tequila shot. It's not like you're not seeing these athletes at the pinnacle of their career, in the sense of, like,
Right.
they're not going out there to try and win. They're going out there trying to put on a performance. The Mackenzie Dern and Ffion Davies match was a little bit different, because that was obviously an actual match. These girls did a proper training camp for it, and even that had upwards of 120,000 people streaming live watching that at the time of that match. So it just goes to show it pulls in the audience. The female match had some of the highest viewership of that event, because people wanted to watch it, because people were interested in it. So the females pull in the audience. It's just about, now we can actually see the data on that. We can see the fluctuation through viewership depending on who was fighting, and now we can take that information and we can go to these fight promotions and say, hey, look, female matches pull viewers, so
Yeah.
pay us equally, pay us more, you know, we deserve it.
So you had a great Ffion Davies call out. And I was looking at this and I'm like, I was like, I don't know Adele, but
Mm.
she seems like a very humble person and very like work hard, let my work speak for me kind of person. It was just like the vibe that I got from your whole run and everything.
Yeah.
And then I saw this call out and I was like, but I kind of fuck with this. Like, this is smart because you have to, as an athlete, have the awareness professionally to
Mm.
know your moments. And you don't get very many ever, to where you have the mic in your hand and the stage and everyone's shutting the hell up
Mm.
and you have opportunity. You see this again in MMA all the time. These guys, it's hard to win in MMA. And so when they do, who do you want to see next? And they go, I want to fight Alex Pereira.
Yeah.
They just call out, they give me the top, because they know they're going to fall down and
Yep.
then get, and do that whole game.
Mm.
But I saw that call out and I just thought it was a good note of your awareness of your career, of your stature and like ability to reach and call out big names like this. I think that fight's incredible and it should 100% happen. Do you feel yourself like kind of going into this like, oh, I see the business side of this is, it might not be 100% who I am, but I got to do this. I need to like evolve as this promoter, because you kind of are. You end up having to be a self promoter, because if you're not shouting, people aren't going to hear you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So how
Exactly.
is that change going for you?
Well, I feel like I pissed off a whole bunch of people doing that call out. I think that
Good.
there were people saying that I was mean. I don't think I was. Wasn't trying to be mean. I wasn't. I have the
No, you
utmost
were
respect for
fine, dude.
Ffion. That's the thing. I
Yeah.
got all the respect. I think that she's done incredible things. I think that she's an incredible athlete. I just want to fight her. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it would be an amazing match. She's top of the mountain right now, and I am fighting to be top of the mountain. And not only that, she before CJI specifically said that she was going to fight the winner of ADCC to get money, and that's what we're trying to do, right? Let's
Yeah.
set up that match to try and get a big chunk of change for both of us, because everybody wants to watch that match. She was also supposed to be in the 55 division, so
Right.
and I can understand why she went to CJI. Like all props to her, but now okay, let's make that match happen. You were supposed to be in the division. Let's make the fight happen, because it didn't happen there. So now's as good a time as any.
What's the limit on your weight? Would you feel comfortable if you had to go up a class, or do you feel like you would need a longer timeline for something like that?
Oh, look, part of me is of the mindset of, like, she said she was going to do 55. She committed to the 55 division. That's where we were supposed to match up. That's where the weight class that we were supposed to fight. So you said you were going to do 55. Let's do 55.
Right.
My guess is I'm going to get some fight back on that. So we're just going to have to wait and see, and try and maybe meet somewhere in the middle. I got no intention of getting too heavy. I'm not a particularly big person. I'm not very tall. I'm not very like I'm not big. I walk around at 5'3" and 57 kilos on the daily basis. So
Right.
I don't want to go up too heavy. It's
Well,
definitely
it
make it fair.
becomes like a performance disadvantage for you. It's a fine line. Like I have
Mm.
a lot of respect, and more so now after talking to a lot of you athletes in this,
Mm.
of how demanding it really is to make a jump or to come down in some
Mm.
cases, because you're really talking about your physiology, and when you start to mess with that, it can be a major gain for the other person. And
Mm.
if you're talking about the livelihood of your career, how many times can you lose and still have a career going in the right trajectory? Like, not
Yeah.
that many. So
No.
if you get a super fight opportunity, you have every right to say, no, we said we were going to do,
Mm.
and fight for that and die on that hill. Because if someone if you went up and made some concession to where you're really uncomfortable, and then you
Mm.
had it and it just didn't go your way, you don't get to go make that choice again and go,
Yeah.
hold on, time out. I that wasn't very fair. Let's
Let's do it again.
like you have every right as an athlete to do that. I think that would be such an exciting fight. What in knowing her as a competitor, someone you obviously respect, another fantastic female in grappling, how do you beat someone like Ffion?
Well, that's what I have the next, however long it is between now and when we have that match, that's exactly what the time is going to be used. It's figuring out that puzzle. Um, yeah, I want to keep my cards pretty close to my chest about some of the stuff that we're going to start to develop or improve on, things like that. There were some things at ADCC that I didn't have a chance to showcase that are quite strong parts of my game. Um, yeah, she is a difficult competitor. It is a hard puzzle to figure out. So we're just going to put as much time and energy into, you know, crossing the T's and dotting the I's so that when we get out there, we're ready to go.
Without keep your cards close for sure. But in a situation like that, if you're game planning, I asked a guest this earlier this week, and I think it's interesting with top level competitors like yourself. You're really good. And everyone else that you're going to fight from now on forever is going to be really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
You all have footage available. You all can go and watch what the other person does. You could study them. You can watch back tape. You all have various skill sets and proficiencies and maybe potential deficiencies. But when you're preparing someone for someone, and it doesn't have to be Ffion, it could be anyone who's high level, where it's going to be a single match. So maybe like a WNO or something like that, where it's not a bracket format. What is the approach? Is it you get with your coach and you guys run tape, or do you talk about how you're feeling? Like, how do you formulate an attack plan to go against a specific individual and come out on top?
So for me, like I pride myself on being well-rounded. I don't want to go into a match with somebody in particular and just fixate and focus on their game and what they're strong at. It's important to be aware of it. So it's important to understand like where they're good, where they're maybe not as good. But if it's just the sole focus when you're out there, you're going to be too fixated on what they're doing rather than what you're doing. And then it's really hard to pull somebody into your A game when you're so scared of their A game. So, going through the different phases of your training camp where it's like skill development, making sure you get your maintenance going on, making sure you're strengthening your A game. It's important to go through that phase, those phases of your training camp.
Yeah, it's crazy what you are all able to pull off and then have it all show up on one day. I think that's the thing I find most impressive is that to have
It was a
tools
very
that,
long burn to get there. Like reality is we started thinking about it as soon as the first ADCC was up, so we had 2 years to prep and get ready. But the actual training camp itself was quite a long one in the sense of maybe the hard training wasn't super duper long, but the build up to it, the making sure that every part of the game was where it wanted to be, but also trial and error of going through those competition reps. So doing other super fights so we could get used to, how me and Jake worked together when we were out there, or, how I felt when I was, doing particular parts of my game while I was out there, going through those processes. So that I felt really confident at ADCC. Everything was a build up for ADCC. We're just ticking boxes.
how do you balance your intensity when you're training? I think it's something that a lot of, not only high level athletes struggle with, but also, of course, people that are doing this after school, after work, in between family demands is the desire to want to train hard, because training hard leaves you feeling depleted. It feels like you put forth a lot of energy. And if you put a lot of effort into something, you're probably going to get better at it.
Yeah.
But we know scientifically from watching high level athletes that the best athletes in the world actually put as much effort into the time in between hard training sessions to make sure that their body's actually adapting and is recovered and they can put forth those efforts. So, ADCC is a gruel. That's an all out demand on your body. You're maxing out everything that you could possibly put on the table.
Yep.
How do you make sure that you're not overstepping when you're in these months and weeks building up to that, and you're actually giving yourself time to replenish, to recover, and to recuperate?
I have people around me that kind of monitor me, making sure that I'm not overtraining. I got a habit of overtraining for the exact reason you were talking about. I like feeling depleted.
It's
I
fun.
like feeling tired. I like being sore. But I have people around me that kind of be like, okay, hey, this session's not going to be as hard today, so don't be a fuckhead and make sure you're, not just trying to kill yourself and win every exchange. Like, stick to the plan that we have today. We spend time in between sessions making sure we're doing proper recovery, whether that be stretching, ice baths, saunas, whatever it's going to be. Sometimes even when the body's feeling particularly beat up, it's okay, we're going to do drilling session instead of another hard hit out today. Um, I make sure that I lift consistently as well so that my body can actually, withstand the load that's put on it through a training camp. So my knees need to be held together, my shoulders need to be held, my neck, my back, all those things need to be held together, and a proper strength program is really important for that. I think that was something that was very noticeable for this ADCC camp, where I don't particularly love lifting. Like sitting in the gym, lifting weights and moving them around isn't my favorite thing. It's not my
Yeah.
favorite part of a training camp, but I stayed really consistent with my lifting program through the ADCC camp. I felt probably the strongest I've ever felt. I felt like structurally as stable as I've ever felt. So I felt safer on the mats. And that was something that allowed me to train at a higher intensity more frequently because I just wasn't picking up as many injuries.
It's so interesting to me how common it is that high level practitioners don't love strength training.
No.
Because I came from opposite background, like being a skier growing up and then having strength train as a necessity for very much of the same reasons to mitigate the risk of injury.
Yeah.
Fell in love with strength training, and that became a career. And then
Mm-hmm.
I would, talk to people and they're like, it's my least favorite part. And I'm like, wow, that's so crazy, especially because you're strong.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's an isometric element of jujitsu when you're gripping and holding and pulling, and you're getting a benefit there. But to
Mm-hmm.
be able to generate, full circle, going back to that breaking power that you have, I think as an outsider, you look at that and you go, Adele must just deadlift 2.5 times her body weight, and she
Yeah.
must just do like, weighted pull ups with an insane amount of weight. But it's really your knowledge of position and technique and where to place your body to
Mm-hmm.
use your whole body. A lot of people try to finish a submission with a part of their body, like they pull with their arms or they squeeze with their wrists or something. But your whole body is this like submission machine that on the
Everything is
right
being
joint.
used.
It's just so cool, and it's funny when I look at where jujitsu could go. The
Mm.
fact that the top level athletes are like strength training, but it was recently becoming part of what they do is
Mm.
crazy to me. That just means that like the margin for progress on the strength and development side, it's just going to be nutty what
Yeah.
we continue to see in athletes like yourself, and then your competitors as well.
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu in general is growing as a professional sport. It's not quite there yet. You see different people doing different types of training camps. Some people are just rolling hard, you know,
Yeah.
3 sessions a day, not really doing anything else other than doing hard sessions of jiu-jitsu. And then you see the other people that are, a little bit more specific with how they're going about things. There is not one way to do it. I don't think that there's one perfect way to train for jiu-jitsu or do jiu-jitsu. But for me, I take from other professional sports and I try and emulate some of those things. Jake has probably read every autobiography from every
Yeah.
sports celebrity, Messi, Ronaldo, Djokovic, the list is just endless. And we steal from a lot of that kind of stuff to see how we can bring more professionalism into jiu-jitsu, because I think that that's what's going to start to pave the way, and that's what's going to allow us to have that competition edge.
And you gave up a potential career as a police officer.
Yep.
Uh, Really, jujitsu was kind of like a something you were utilizing to help prepare yourself. Do you ever think back to that? Standing where you are now, I think it's obvious that you're 100% you're doing the right thing.
Right,
Keep
right
doing it.
now, it's really easy to be like, yeah, I made the right decision. It wasn't always like that. It took some time
Yeah.
to settle into this decision, and it was really scary when I first did it. But I'm very grateful that I had the people around me to encourage me and motivate me into doing it. I had a lot of support. Nobody was making me think about what the responsible decision was. Everybody was like, follow your dreams, follow your goals, and I'm very grateful that happened, because now I'm where I'm at and have had and will hopefully continue to have a successful career in jiu-jitsu.
Well, I'm stoked that you didn't become a police officer. Not because I don't think you would have been good. I think you would have been great, but because you didn't, we get to watch moments like your ADCC performance and have you on podcasts and get to hear your story. So Adele, I'm so stoked that Jake connected us. It's been awesome having you on, and we'll have to stay in touch. I feel like there's going to be a lot more opportunities for you, and with your mindset and dedication to it, kind of scared for your opponents.
I think hopefully it's just the beginning for me. I hope I got some. I hope that even this year, I don't plan on being done this year. I plan on having some more matches this year, but I want to stick around for as long as I can.
Well, if I get too obsessed with the breaking limbs thing, I'll just, when people get hurt, I'll have them deflect to you, call you because it's your fault.
Exactly, man. You
You've
send them my way. It's
reignited,
fine.
yeah, you reignited the way that I look at submission. So thank you so much, Adele. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And now, hey friends, Abe here. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and sticking around to the very end. If you want to support it, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or check out www.maynideapodcast.com, join the mailing list, and stay up to date on all things The Mayn Idea, from future guests, sponsorship opportunities, products that I'm using to help me perform at my best, invites to ask me anything, and any upcoming pertinent information to the show. I cannot do this show without you. It is literally why I show up each week and put these episodes together. So thank you from the bottom of my heart from being part of the community. I hope you have a great day.